Elias Vance woke up at the same time every morning. His body did not let him sleep past 5 o'clock. 30 years in the military had trained him this way. Even now, 6 years after his retirement, his eyes would open before the sun came up. His bones would ache, his back would hurt. But he would get out of bed anyway. That was just how he was built. He lived alone in a small cottage on a moon called Kairos 7. It was a cold place. The air was thin and the wind never stopped blowing. Most humans did not want to live here. That was exactly why Elias had chosen it. He had seen too many people die. He had killed too many himself. After 30 years of war, of blood, of screaming and fire and the silence that came after battles, he wanted nothing more than quiet. Kairos 7 gave him that quiet. His cottage was small but comfortable. He had a kitchen, a bedroom, and a room where he kept his books. He had a fireplace that burned synthetic fuel. He had a window that looked out over the frozen plains, and every morning, he made tea. It was a simple thing. Water, leaves, heat. But it reminded him of Earth. It reminded him of his wife, Maria, who had died 15 years ago while he was fighting somewhere among the stars. It reminded him of the home he could never return to. The kettle whistled. Elias poured the water into his cup and watched the steam rise. Outside, the sky was turning from black to gray. Another day on this frozen rock. He put on his coat and stepped outside. The cold hit him immediately. It was the kind of cold that went through your clothes and into your skin, and then into your bones. Elias had felt worse. During the Battle of Arcturus Station, the life support had failed for 3 hours. 20 men had frozen to death beside him. He had survived by burning anything that would burn. This cold was nothing compared to that. He walked down the path that led from his cottage to the checkpoint. The checkpoint was about 200 meters away. It was a small building, made of gray metal, built on the border between human space and draconian territory. Long ago, it had been an important place. Diplomats had come here. Soldiers had stood guard. Ships had been inspected. Now it was forgotten. The wars were over. The treaties had been signed. Nobody cared about this tiny moon anymore. Nobody except Elias. And one other. He saw her standing at her post, just as she did every morning. Cythera. That was what he called her. Her real name was impossible for human mouths to speak. It was a sound like ice cracking and wind howling and something deeper that humans could not hear. Cythera was a draconian. Her people had been sailing between the stars for 1,000,000 years. When humans were still living in caves and hunting with sharp rocks, the draconians had already built empires across 1,000 worlds. They were ancient. They were powerful. They were proud. And they were cold. Not just in personality. Their bodies were actually cold. They were cold-blooded, like the reptiles of old Earth. They could not make their own heat. In warm places, they were fast and strong and dangerous. In cold places, they slowed down. They became sluggish. If it got cold enough, they would simply stop. Kairos 7 was very, very cold. Cythera stood 12 feet tall. Her scales were the color of deep sapphires, dark blue with hints of purple that caught the light. She had 2 arms and 2 legs, like a human, but her body was covered entirely in those beautiful scales. Her face was long and narrow, with a snout like the dragons from human fairy tales. Her eyes were golden, with vertical pupils like a cat. Right now, those eyes were barely open. Frost covered her scales. Ice hung from the crests on her head. Her breath came slow and shallow, white mist in the frozen air. She looked like a statue. A beautiful, frozen statue. Elias had watched her stand like this for months when he first arrived. He had not spoken to her. He had not approached her. The Draconians did not like humans. They considered them primitive and short-lived and not worth their attention. But Elias could not stop watching her suffer, because that was what she was doing. Suffering. He could see it in the way she held herself, in the tiny trembles that ran through her body, in the way her claws gripped the railing of her post. She was freezing. Slowly, day by day, she was freezing to death, and nobody cared. No draconian ships came to check on her. No human authorities asked about her. She was simply there, standing at her post, waiting for something that would never come. After 6 months, Elias could not watch anymore. That first morning, he had walked up to the checkpoint with a thermos in his hand. Cythera had not moved. She had not acknowledged him. Her golden eyes had tracked him slowly, like a predator too cold to hunt. "You look cold," he had said. No response. Just that slow, golden stare. "I brought tea. It is warm. Maybe it will help." He had held out the thermos. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with movements that looked painful, Cythera had reached down. Her claws were as long as his fingers. They could have cut through metal. Instead, they wrapped around the thermos with surprising gentleness. She had brought it to her lips and drunk. The effect was immediate. Her eyes opened wider. Her body straightened slightly. Color seemed to flow back into her scales, the blue becoming brighter, more alive. "Thank you," she had said. Her voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. It was the first time she had ever spoken to him. "You are welcome," Elias had replied. "I will bring more tomorrow." That had been 2 years ago. Now it was a ritual. Every morning, Elias made tea. Every morning, he walked to the checkpoint. Every morning, he gave the thermos to Cythera. They did not talk much at first. Draconians were not a talkative species. They considered most conversation to be a waste of energy. But slowly, over months, words began to come. Elias learned that Cythera was a nurse. She had been trained in draconian medicine, which was far more advanced than anything humans had. She could heal wounds that human doctors would consider fatal. She could treat diseases that humans had no cure for. She had been stationed at this checkpoint to monitor biological contamination. It was her job to make sure that no human diseases crossed into draconian space, and that no draconian diseases crossed into human space. It was important work. Or at least, it had been important once. Now, with the wars over and the border mostly closed, there was nothing to monitor. No ships came. No people crossed. Cythera stood at her post and watched empty skies. "How long have you been here?" Elias asked one morning. 11 of your years, Cythera replied. Elias did the math in his head. 11 years. 11 years standing in this frozen wasteland, slowly freezing, with no relief and no company. "That is a long time," he said. "Yes. Why do they not send someone to replace you? Why do they not bring you somewhere warmer?" Cythera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was even rougher than usual. "I am being punished." Elias waited. He had learned that Draconians did not like to be rushed. They would speak when they were ready. "During the border conflicts," Cythera continued, "I was stationed at a military hospital. Human prisoners were brought to us. They were wounded, dying. My commanders ordered me to let them die." She paused. The wind howled around them. "I did not obey. I treated them. I saved them. 17 human soldiers lived because of me." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered the border conflicts. He had fought in them. He had seen what both sides did to prisoners. "That was a brave thing to do," he said. "It was not brave. It was necessary. I am a nurse. I heal. That is what I do. I could not watch them die and do nothing. But your people did not see it that way. No. They saw it as betrayal, as contamination. They said I had been infected by human weakness. They stripped me of my rank. They sent me here to freeze. Yes, that is the traditional punishment for the disgraced. We are sent to cold places and left alone. Eventually we stop. It is considered a mercy. We do not have to live with our shame." Elias stared at her. The horror of it settled into his stomach like a stone. "They sent you here to die," he said flatly. "Yes, and you have been waiting for 11 years. My people are patient, and I am stubborn. I will not give them the satisfaction of dying quietly." There was something in her voice that Elias recognized. He had heard it in the voices of soldiers who refused to surrender, who kept fighting even when there was no hope. He had felt it himself, many times. "Good," he said. "Do not die. Keep fighting. Why do you care?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about it for a moment. "I do not know," he admitted. "Maybe because I have seen too many good people die. Maybe because I am tired of death. Maybe because you saved human lives when you did not have to, and that means something to me." He looked up at her. She was watching him with those golden eyes. "Or maybe I just do not like seeing someone suffer alone. I have been alone. It is not good." Cythera did not respond. But the next morning, when Elias brought the tea, she was waiting for him. And for the first time, she spoke first. Tell me about Earth, she said. So, Elias did. He told her about the blue oceans and the green forests. He told her about the mountains that touched the clouds and the rivers that ran to the sea. He told her about rain, which she had never experienced. He told her about summer, when the world was warm and full of life. He told her about the cities, with their millions of people living on top of each other. He told her about the quiet places, the farms and villages, where life moved slowly. He told her about the food, the music, the art. He told her about Maria. She was my wife, he said. We met when we were young. I was a soldier even then. She was a teacher. She taught children how to read. What happened to her? She got sick. Cancer. By the time they found it, it was too late. Elias paused. The old pain stirred in his chest. I was not there. I was fighting somewhere. I do not even remember where. By the time I got home, she was gone. I am sorry. It was a long time ago. 15 years. But I still miss her. Draconians do not pair as humans do, Cythera said slowly. We do not have wives, husbands. We have breeding contracts, arranged matings for the good of our lineage. That sounds cold. It is efficient. Emotions cloud judgment. Attachment creates weakness. Maybe. But it also creates strength. The things I did in the war, I did because I wanted to go home to Maria. She made me fight harder. She made me survive. Cythera was quiet for a long moment. I do not understand, she said finally. But I would like to. And so the days continued. Every morning, tea. Every morning, conversation. Elias told Cythera about humanity, about their wars and their loves, their art and their madness, their cruelty and their kindness. He told her about the soldiers he had fought beside and the enemies he had respected. He told her about the fear and the courage and the strange way that both could exist in the same heart. Cythera listened. She asked questions. Some of them were strange, coming from a perspective so different from his own. Why did humans waste resources on art? Why did they care for the weak and the old? Why did they form attachments that would only end in pain? Elias did not always have answers. Sometimes he just shrugged and said, "That is how we are." But he also learned about the Draconians, about their ancient history, their vast empire, their cold and logical way of seeing the universe. He learned that they lived for hundreds of years, that they measured time differently, that what seemed like patience to humans was simply the normal pace of their existence. He learned that they were not without emotion. They felt pride and shame, anger and satisfaction, but they considered these feelings to be weaknesses, things to be controlled and hidden. To show emotion was to show vulnerability, and vulnerability was death. That is why they do not understand you, Elias said one day. You showed compassion. You helped enemies. In their eyes, you showed weakness. Yes, but it was not weakness. It was strength. It takes more courage to help an enemy than to kill one. Cythera tilted her head, a gesture he had come to recognize as curiosity. You are strange, human, she said. Your logic does not follow any pattern I can understand. Maybe that is why we have survived this long. Nobody can predict what we will do next. Perhaps, or perhaps you have simply been lucky. Elias laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in years. Maybe both, he said. Probably both. The seasons changed on Kairos 7. Not that there was much change to see. It went from very cold to extremely cold and back again. But Elias noticed that Cythera seemed to stand a little straighter as the months passed. Her scales seemed a little brighter. Her voice seemed a little stronger. She was not dying anymore. She was living. The tea helped. The warmth that Elias brought every morning helped. But it was more than that. It was the talking, the connection, the simple fact that someone cared whether she lived or died. Elias understood this because he felt it too. For years, he had been waiting to die, not actively seeking death, but not fighting against it either. He had been empty, hollow, going through the motions of life without actually living. Now, for the first time since Maria's death, he had a purpose. Someone depended on him. Someone was waiting for him every morning. It was a small thing, a cup of tea, a conversation, but small things could carry great weight. One morning, as Elias approached the checkpoint, Cythera spoke before he could offer the thermos. Why do you do this? She asked. Do what? This. She gestured at the thermos, at him, at the space between them. You gain nothing. You waste your time, your resources, your warmth. For me, for an alien who your people fear and distrust. Why? Elias thought about the question. He had been asking himself the same thing. Because you are here, he said finally. And no one should be alone in the cold. That is not a human thing or a draconian thing. That is just a thing, a truth. Nobody deserves to freeze alone. Cythera stared at him. Her golden eyes were unreadable. You are a very strange creature, Elias Vance, she said. I know. I am glad you are here. It was the closest thing to affection he had ever heard from her. He smiled. I am glad I am here too. Now drink your tea before it gets cold. She took the thermos from his hands, and for just a moment, her claws brushed against his fingers. They were still cold, but not as cold as they used to be. The mornings on Cairo 7 all looked the same. Gray sky, white snow, endless wind. But to Elias Vance, each morning was different. Each morning brought new conversations, new understanding, new moments with Cythera. 3 years had passed since he first offered her tea. In that time, something had changed between them. It was hard to name. Humans might call it friendship. Draconians had no word for it at all. But whatever it was real. It was warm. It was the reason Elias got out of bed every morning. Today, the wind was particularly harsh. It cut through his coat and made his old bones ache. But he walked to the checkpoint anyway. The thermos was warm in his hands. Cythera was waiting for him. She always waited for him now. In the early days, she had stood at her post and ignored his approach until he was right in front of her. Now, she turned to watch him as soon as he stepped out of his cottage. The wind is bad today, she said as he approached. I have felt worse. You always say that, because it is always true. He handed her the thermos. She took it carefully, her massive claws gentle around the small container. She had learned to be careful with human things. They broke so easily. She drank. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. The frost on her scales began to melt. Tell me more about your wars, she said. This had become their pattern. Elias would talk. Cythera would listen. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she offered her own perspective. But mostly, she just listened. Which war do you want to hear about? The one that made you tired. Elias was quiet for a moment. He knew which war she meant. They all made him tired. But one had broken something inside him that never healed. The siege of Vega Prime, he said finally. That was the one. He did not want to talk about it. But Cythera had shared her shame with him, her exile, her punishment. He owed her the same honesty. It was the 3rd year of the Syndicate Wars. The Syndicate had taken a colony world called Vega Prime, 20 million civilians. They used them as shields. They knew we would not bomb a planet full of our own people. He paused. The memories were coming back. He pushed them down. We landed troops instead. I was a commander by then. I led 3,000 soldiers into that hell. The fighting was house to house, room to room. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing ground. How long did it last? 7 months. We lost 2,000 soldiers in the first 3 months. By the end, I had 400 left. And the civilians? Elias closed his eyes. 17 million survived. 3 million did not. The wind howled. Neither of them spoke. I killed a lot of people in those 7 months, Elias continued. Enemy soldiers. Yes, but also others. People who got in the way. People who were in the wrong place. People who looked like threats but were not. You were trying to survive. That is what I told myself. That is what everyone told me. But I still see their faces sometimes. When I close my eyes, I still hear them. Cythera was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something she had never done before. She reached down and placed one massive claw on his shoulder. The weight was enormous, but the gesture was gentle. I understand, she said. I have faces too. I have voices. The ones I could not save. The ones who died while I watched. They do not leave. How do you live with it? I do not know. I just keep living. Maybe that is the only answer. We keep going. We carry them with us. And we try to do better. Elias looked up at her. Her golden eyes were soft. Understanding. You are wiser than you pretend to be, he said. And you are kinder than you admit. We are both hiding things." He laughed. It was a small laugh, sad around the edges, but it was real. "I suppose we are." They stood together in silence for a while. The wind died down. The sky brightened slightly. "Tell me about your son," Cythera said finally. Elias flinched. He had mentioned Thomas once, briefly. He had not expected her to remember. "There is not much to tell. You said he does not speak to you." "He does not." "Why?" Elias sighed. This wound was fresher than the war, closer to his heart. "Because I was not there. When he was growing up. When Maria got sick. When she died. I was always somewhere else. Fighting someone else's war. Saving someone else's world. My family needed me, and I was not there. You were serving your people. That is what I told myself. But Thomas does not see it that way. He sees a father who chose strangers over his own family. He sees a man who let his mother die alone while he was playing hero on some distant planet. Is that what you see?" The question cut deep. Elias took a long breath. "Sometimes. On bad days. I tell myself I had no choice. That duty called. That the needs of many outweigh the needs of few. But Thomas was not many. He was one. My one. And I failed him. Have you tried to make amends?" "I have tried to contact him. Messages. Calls. He does not respond. The last time I saw him was at Maria's funeral. He told me not to come back. And you listened. What else could I do? I could not force him to forgive me. I could not undo 20 years of absence. So I came here. To the edge of everything. Where I could not hurt anyone else." Cythera was quiet. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "My people do not understand human families. We are raised communally. We do not know our parents as individuals. But I think I understand this. You are still running." "What do you mean?" "You came here to hide. To wait for death. You said this yourself. But hiding does not heal. Running does not fix what is broken. So what should I do?" "I do not know. But I know what you should not do. You should not give up. Your son is alive. You are alive. The possibility of healing exists. You should not waste it." Elias looked at her. "When did you become a philosopher?" "I have had 11 years to think. Now 14. That is a long time, even for a draconian." She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing something and doing something about it were different things. "I will think about it," he said. "That is all I ask." The days continued. The ritual continued. Tea every morning. Conversation every morning. Two lonely creatures finding something like peace in each other's company. Elias noticed that Cythera was changing. Not physically. Her scales were still the same deep blue. Her body was still massive and powerful. But something in her manner was different. She laughed sometimes now. A strange sound. Like rocks tumbling down a hillside. But it was a laugh. She asked questions about things that draconians did not care about. Music, art, stories. She wanted to know about human movies and human books and human songs. "Why do you make these things?" she asked one day. "What purpose do they serve?" "They make us feel things. They help us understand ourselves. They give us something to share with each other. But they are not real. The stories are not true. The songs do not change anything. Maybe not. But they make life more bearable." When Maria was dying, she listened to music. Old songs from Earth. They made her smile. They gave her comfort. That was real. Even if the songs were not. Cythera thought about this for a long time. "Will you sing for me?" she asked finally. Elias blinked. "I am not a good singer. I do not care. I want to know what it sounds like. A human singing." He felt foolish. He had not sung in decades. But she was looking at him with those golden eyes, curious and hopeful, and he could not say no. He cleared his throat. He searched his memory for a song. He found one that Maria used to love. An old ballad about sailors coming home from the sea. His voice cracked on the high notes. He forgot some of the words. It was, objectively, a terrible performance. But when he finished, Cythera's eyes were bright. "That was beautiful," she said. "It was terrible. Perhaps by human standards. But to me it was new. Strange. Wonderful. I have never heard anything like it." "Really? Draconians do not have music. We have ceremonial chants, ritual recitations. But nothing like that. Nothing that exists just to be beautiful." Elias shook his head. Your people have traveled the stars for 1,000,000 years, and you do not have music? We have efficiency. We have purpose. We have duty. But we do not have joy. Not like humans do. That sounds lonely. I did not know it was lonely until I met you. Now I understand what we are missing. She paused. Her voice dropped lower. I think that is why my people sent me here. Not because I saved human lives. Because I showed that I could feel. That I could care. That made me dangerous. Dangerous how? Draconians believe that emotion is weakness. That attachment leads to failure. If others saw that one of us could feel compassion, could act on empathy, they might start to question. They might start to feel as well. And then, everything our society is built on would crumble. Would that be a bad thing? I do not know. I used to think so. Now I am not sure. My people have survived for 1,000,000 years by being cold, by being logical, by cutting away anything that did not serve the greater good. But we have not grown. We have not changed. We are the same now as we were at the beginning. And humans? You have only been in space for a few centuries. But you have already spread further than we expected. You have adapted to environments we thought impossible. You have built things we never imagined. And you have done it all while being illogical, emotional, chaotic. You make us sound like a disease. Perhaps you are. But perhaps that is what the galaxy needs. A disease of feeling. A plague of kindness. Elias laughed. That is either the nicest thing or the strangest thing anyone has ever said about my species. Both, I think. They fell into a comfortable silence. The wind had stopped. For once, the world was quiet. Cythera, Elias said finally, what would you do if you could leave this place? She tilted her head. I have thought about this many times. At first, I wanted revenge. I wanted to go back to my people and show them they were wrong. I wanted to prove that compassion was not weakness. And now? Now I do not care about my people. I do not want their approval. I do not need their acceptance. What I want is simpler. What do you want? She looked at him. Her golden eyes were warm. I want more mornings like this. Tea. Conversation. Someone who cares whether I live or die. That is all. That is everything. Elias felt something move in his chest. Something that had been frozen for a long time. I want that too, he said. Then we are lucky. We have found what we want. Most creatures never do. You are very optimistic for someone who was sent here to die. I was sent here to die, but I chose to live. That is the difference. I refused to be what they expected. And now, I have something they will never understand. What is that? A friend? The word hung in the air between them. Draconians did not have friends. They had allies and enemies, superiors and subordinates. But friends were a human concept. Until now? Yes, Elias said. A friend. Cythera reached down and took the empty thermos from his hands. Their fingers brushed again. This time, her scales were warm. Tomorrow, she said. Same time. Same time. He turned and walked back to his cottage. Behind him, he heard something. A sound like rocks tumbling, like ice breaking. Cythera was laughing. That night, Elias sat by his fire and thought about Thomas. About Maria. About all the years he had wasted running from his failures. Cythera was right. He was still running. Even here, at the edge of the galaxy, he was hiding from his past. But maybe it was not too late. Maybe healing was still possible. Maybe Thomas would never forgive him. But at least he could try. At least he could stop running. He picked up his communicator. He stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he began to compose a message. He did not expect a response. He did not ask for one. He simply wrote down everything he had never been able to say. That he was sorry. That he had been wrong. That he understood why Thomas hated him. That he loved him anyway. That he always had. That he always would. He sent the message into the void. Then he went to bed and slept better than he had in years. The next morning, he made tea and walked to the checkpoint. Cythera was waiting. You look different, she said. I feel different. What happened? I stopped running. At least a little. She nodded slowly. Good. That is good. He handed her the thermos. She took it and drank. Tell me a story, she said. A human story. One with a happy ending. Elias thought for a moment. Then he smiled. Let me tell you about a soldier and a nurse, he said. Two lonely creatures on a frozen moon. Nobody expected them to become friends. But they did anyway. Against all logic. Against all odds. Does this story have an ending? Not yet. It is still being written. Cythera's golden eyes sparkled. Good, she said. I like stories that are still being written. They are full of possibilities. And so the morning continued. Tea and conversation. Two friends finding warmth in a cold universe. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The attack came without warning. Elias was in his cottage when he heard the ships. The sound was wrong. Not the smooth hum of patrol vessels or the heavy drone of cargo transports. This was something rougher, hungrier. He knew that sound from his years in the military. These were raider ships. Pirates. He moved to the window and looked out. 3 ships were landing on the frozen plains between his cottage and the checkpoint. They were ugly things, patched together from stolen parts. Their hulls were painted with crude symbols, skulls and flames and broken chains. Syndicate remnants. They still existed in the outer reaches, preying on isolated outposts and forgotten settlements. Most people thought they were gone. Those people were wrong. Elias watched as the hatches opened and figures began to emerge. 20 of them, maybe more. They carried weapons and moved with the careless confidence of people who did not expect resistance. They were heading toward the checkpoint. Toward Cythera. Elias did not hesitate. He went to the back of his cottage, to the locked cabinet he had not opened in 6 years. The lock recognized his fingerprint and clicked open. Inside was his old service rifle, a Frontier Fleet plasma cannon, modified for long-range accuracy. Beside it was his combat vest, his knife, and 4 spare power cells. He had kept them as reminders of who he used to be. He never expected to use them again. He put on the vest. He loaded the rifle. He checked the power cells. His hands did not shake. His mind was clear. It was like putting on an old uniform. Everything came back. He stepped outside. The raiders had reached the checkpoint. They were spreading out, surrounding the building. Some were pointing at Cythera, laughing at the frozen draconian standing motionless at her post. They thought she was helpless. They thought this would be easy. Elias walked toward them. One of the raiders noticed him first, a young man with a scarred face and cruel eyes. He nudged his companions and pointed at the approaching figure. "Look at this," he called out. An old man, probably the caretaker. The others turned to look. More laughter, more pointing. Elias kept walking. He counted them as he moved. 23 in total. Most had standard ballistic weapons. A few had plasma pistols. One had a heavy repeater mounted on a tripod. Bad odds. Very bad odds. He stopped about 50 meters from the nearest raider. His rifle hung at his side, casual, non-threatening. "Turn around," he said. His voice was calm, conversational. The raiders stared at him. Then they burst out laughing. "Did you hear that?" the scarred one said. "The old man wants us to leave." "I am not asking," Elias said. "I am telling you. Turn around. Get back on your ships. Leave this place. Or what? Or I will kill all of you." More laughter. The scarred one stepped forward, grinning. "You are funny, old man. I like you. Tell you what. Drop your weapon, give us whatever supplies you have, and we will let you live. Sound fair?" Elias looked at him. Really looked at him. The scarred one was young, maybe 25. He had the swagger of someone who had never faced a real soldier. Someone who had only ever fought the weak and the helpless. "You do not know who I am," Elias said. "Should I care? Probably. My name is Elias Vance, Commander Elias Vance. Maybe you have heard of me." The smile on the scarred one's face flickered. One of the older raiders, a woman with gray hair and mechanical eyes, went pale. "The Butcher of Vega Prime," she whispered. The word spread through the group. Elias saw fear spark in some of their eyes. The Butcher of Vega Prime. That was what the Syndicate had called him during the war. He hated that name, but it had its uses. "You are dead," the scarred one said. His voice was less confident now. "They said you died at Arcturus. They were wrong. You are just an old man now. That was 30 years ago. Yes, 30 years. Do you know how long that is? Do you know how many people I killed in those 30 years? How many battles I survived? How many men like you I have buried? He raised his rifle slowly. The movement was smooth, practiced. The weapon came up like it was part of his body. I have killed more people than you have ever met. I have fought in wars you have only heard stories about. I have done things that would give you nightmares. And you think you can take me? You think 23 children with stolen weapons can beat the butcher of Vega Prime? Silence. The wind howled. The raiders looked at each other uncertainly. Walk away, Elias said. This is your last chance. The scarred one's face twisted. His pride was stronger than his fear. Kill him, he said. What happened next would later be called the 7-Minute War. It was not a war. It was barely even a battle. It was one old man teaching a group of young fools why some names should never be forgotten. Elias moved. The first shot took the scarred one through the chest. The second took the woman with mechanical eyes. The third and fourth killed the men setting up the heavy repeater. Then he was among them. They expected him to stand still, to trade shots from a distance. They did not expect a 60-year-old man to charge directly into their formation. Elias was not just a soldier. He was a close combat specialist. He had trained for decades in techniques designed to kill quickly and quietly. The rifle was for reaching out. His knife was for close work. He ducked under a wild shot and put his knife through the shooter's throat. He spun and fired twice, dropping 2 more. A woman came at him with a shock baton. He broke her arm and used her as a shield while he killed 2 more behind her. They were screaming now, panicking, shooting wildly. Half of them were hitting each other. Elias moved through them like a ghost. Every shot was precise. Every cut was lethal. He did not feel anger. He did not feel fear. He just felt the cold clarity that had kept him alive through 30 years of war. But he was old. And there were too many of them. A lucky shot caught him in the side. The pain was sharp and hot. He stumbled. Another shot grazed his shoulder. Blood began to soak through his vest. He kept fighting. He killed 3 more, 4 more. But they were surrounding him now, closing in. His rifle was empty. His knife was stuck in someone's chest. 3 of them remained. They had him cornered against the checkpoint wall. Their weapons were raised. Their hands were shaking. Drop it, one of them said. His voice cracked with fear. Just drop it. Elias considered his options. He could probably take one of them before they shot him. Maybe 2. But not all 3. This was the end. He had lived longer than he expected anyway. Then he heard the roar. It was a sound unlike anything the raiders had ever heard. It was deeper than thunder, louder than a ship engine, more primal than anything born of technology. It was the sound of an apex predator awakening from long sleep. Cythera. The wall of the checkpoint exploded outward. The draconian nurse burst through like a force of nature. Her scales had changed color, shifting from deep blue to blazing crimson. Her eyes were no longer golden. They were red as fire. She was moving faster than anything her size should be able to move. The first raider did not even have time to scream. Her claws caught him across the chest and tore him in half. The second tried to run. She caught him by the head and crushed it like a ripe fruit. The third fired his weapon directly into her face. The shots bounced off her scales. She picked him up with one hand and looked at him. He was crying, begging, promising to do anything if she would just let him go. Cythera opened her jaws and bit down. Silence. Elias slumped against the wall. Blood was pooling beneath him. His vision was getting dark around the edges. Cythera turned to look at him. The crimson was fading from her scales, replaced by deep blue once more. The fire in her eyes dimmed to gold. Elias, she said. Her voice was rough. Scared? I am fine, he tried to say. But the words came out as a whisper. She crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. She knelt beside him, her massive form curling around his broken body. You are dying, she said. Probably. I will not allow it. She picked him up like he weighed nothing. She carried him inside the checkpoint, to the medical equipment that had sat unused for 14 years. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness. He felt needles. He felt warmth. He felt Cythera's claws. Impossibly gentle, working to save his life. Stay with me, she kept saying. Stay with me, Elias. You do not get to die. Not today. Not like this. He wanted to tell her that it was okay, that he had lived a good life, that he was glad to have known her, but the darkness was too strong. It pulled him down and under and away. The last thing he heard was Cythera's voice, rough and desperate and full of something he had never heard from a draconian before. Fear. Real fear. The fear of losing someone she loved. Then there was nothing. Elias woke 3 days later in a medical bay he did not recognize. The walls were white. The lights were soft. Machines beeped quietly around him. His first thought was that he was dead. His second thought was that death was surprisingly comfortable. Then a face appeared above him. Human. Young. Female. She was wearing a military uniform with medical insignia. "Commander Vance," she said. "Welcome back." He tried to speak. His throat was dry. She gave him water. "Where am I?" he managed. "The USS Mercy. A patrol ship. We received your emergency beacon and arrived as quickly as we could." Emergency beacon. He had forgotten he still had one. It must have activated automatically when he was wounded. "Cythera," he said. "The Draconian. Is she?" "She is alive." "Barely." The doctor's face was complicated, a mixture of wonder and concern. "When we arrived, we found you inside the checkpoint. You were stable. All your wounds had been treated. The Draconian was wrapped around you." "Wrapped around me?" "Like a cocoon. She had used her own body heat to keep you warm, to keep you alive. By the time we got there, she was nearly frozen solid. Her core temperature was critical. Another hour and she would have died." Elias closed his eyes. She had burned every calorie of warmth she had hoarded over the past 3 years. She had given everything to save him. "I need to see her. Commander, you have been through severe trauma. You need to rest." "I need to see her." The doctor hesitated. Then she nodded. They brought him to her room in a wheelchair. Cythera lay on an oversized medical bed, surrounded by heat lamps and thermal blankets. Her scales were dull. Her eyes were closed. She looked small somehow, fragile. Elias reached out and touched her claw. It was cold. "She has been asking for you," the doctor said quietly. "Every time she wakes up, even for a moment, she asks if you are alive. Tell her I am here. Tell her I am not going anywhere." The doctor nodded and left them alone. Elias sat by her bed. He held her claw in both hands, trying to share whatever warmth he had. "You stupid, brave, wonderful creature," he whispered. "You almost killed yourself for me." Her eyes opened slowly. Golden, but dim. "Elias," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "I am here. You are alive." "Yes. Thanks to you." "Good." A pause. "That is good." Her eyes closed again, but her claw tightened slightly around his hand. They stayed like that for a long time. The old soldier and the frozen nurse. 2 creatures who had saved each other from the cold. Word spread, as it always does. The story of the 7-minute war reached the news networks. A retired commander and a draconian exile, fighting side by side against impossible odds. It was the kind of story people loved. Heroic, romantic, strange. Reporters wanted interviews. Officials wanted statements. Everyone wanted a piece of the legend. Elias refused them all. He had no interest in being a hero again. He just wanted to go home. And when Cythera was strong enough to travel, that was exactly what they did. They returned to Cairo 7, to the cottage, to the checkpoint. The bodies of the raiders had been cleaned up. The ships had been taken away. But the scars remained. Bullet holes in the walls, bloodstains on the snow. Elias stood outside his cottage and looked at the checkpoint. Cythera was there, at her post, as she had always been. But now she was not alone. He walked to her with a thermos in his hand. "Tea?" he asked. She looked down at him. Her scales were slowly regaining their color. Her eyes were bright once more. "Yes," she said. "Tea would be perfect." He handed her the thermos. She drank. "We need to talk," she said after a moment. "About what?" "About what happened. About what I did. About what I felt." Elias waited. He had learned that Draconians spoke in their own time. "When I saw you fall," Cythera continued, "I felt something I have never felt before. It was like fire inside me. Like everything I was suddenly had purpose. I did not think. I did not plan. I just moved. I would have torn the moon apart to reach you. That is called love," Elias said quietly. "Love." She rolled the word around in her mouth like it was foreign. "My people do not have this word. We have duty, loyalty, obligation. but not love. Maybe you just did not recognize it. Perhaps. She looked at him. I did not understand why you brought me tea all those years. Why you talked to me. Why you cared. Now I understand. This is what you felt. This fire. This need. Yes. And you felt it for me? A draconian? An alien? I felt it for you. A person. A friend. Someone I care about more than I care about myself. Cythera was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Softer. I do not know how to be loved, she said. I do not know how to love in return. My people never taught me. But I want to learn. If you will teach me. Elias smiled. It was the first real smile he had allowed himself in years. It is not something you teach, he said. It is something you do. Day by day. Morning by morning. One cup of tea at a time. Then we will do it. Together. Together. She reached down and took his hand in her claw. The scales were warm, and somewhere far away, in the vast coldness of space, the galaxy kept spinning. Wars began and ended. Empires rose and fell. Billions of lives flickered in and out of existence. But on a frozen moon at the edge of everything, two lonely creatures had found something worth living for, and that was enough. 20 years was a long time for a human. For Elias Vance, it felt like both a moment and a lifetime. After the raid, things changed on Kairos 7. The forgotten moon was forgotten no more. Ships came now and then. Patrol vessels checking on the famous pair. Reporters hoping for stories. Curious travelers who had heard the legend and wanted to see it for themselves. Most were turned away. Elias was not interested in fame. Cythera was not interested in spectacle. They wanted only what they had always wanted. Peace, quiet, and each other. But some visitors could not be ignored. The first came 2 months after the raid. A draconian cruiser dropped out of hyperspace and hung in orbit like a storm cloud waiting to break. Elias watched it from his window with a cold feeling in his stomach. They have come for me, Cythera said. She stood beside him, her scales reflecting the ship's distant lights. Will you go with them? I do not know. I must hear what they have to say. The delegation arrived the next morning. 3 draconians in ceremonial armor, their scales polished to mirror brightness. They were smaller than Cythera, which meant they were probably young. Important young, given the quality of their armor. They spoke in the draconian language, which Elias could not understand. But he watched their faces, their postures. He could read people well enough to know what was happening. They were offering her something. Restoration. Honor. A return to her people. Cythera listened without expression. When they finished speaking, she responded in the same language. Whatever she said made them flinch. The lead delegate argued. Cythera cut him off with a single harsh word. They left. The cruiser departed orbit that same day and never returned. What did they offer you? Elias asked that night. They said the High Council had reviewed my case. The humans I saved during the border conflicts had given testimony. They said I acted with honor. They offered to restore my rank, my station, my place in society. And you refused. I refused. Why? Cythera looked at him. Her golden eyes were calm. Because they did not understand. They thought they were offering me something valuable. But what they offered was nothing compared to what I have. Rank? I do not need rank. Station? I have my station. A place in society? My place is here. With you. Elias felt something warm spread through his chest. You gave up everything for this frozen rock, he said. I gave up nothing. I gained everything. She reached out and took his hand. Her claws were gentle. Besides, she added, they only came because we are famous now. If I had died here as expected, they would never have acknowledged me. They only want me back because refusing me would make them look bad. Politics, even among the stars, especially among the stars. They laughed together. It was becoming easier, more natural. The draconian laugh and the human laugh did not sound the same, but they fit together somehow. The second visitor came 6 months later. This one was human. Elias was working in his garden. He had started growing things after the raid, vegetables that could survive the cold, herbs that reminded him of Earth. The work kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. He heard the shuttle land but did not look up. Visitors came and went. Most gave up when they realized he was not going to perform for them. But this visitor did not go to the cottage. He came straight to the garden. Elias looked up and felt the world stop. Thomas. His son was older than he remembered. There was gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes. He was no longer the angry young man who had told his father never to come back. He was middle-aged, worn, tired. They stared at each other for a long moment. "You got my message," Elias said finally. "I got your message. All of them. I just was not ready to respond." "And now you are?" Thomas did not answer immediately. He looked around the garden, at the cottage, at the distant checkpoint where Cythera stood watching them. "I saw the news reports," he said. "About the raid. About what you did. About her. And I realized something. I have been angry at you for 30 years. 30 years of hating you, blaming you, telling myself you were a monster who abandoned his family. I did abandon you. In many ways. Yes, you did. But you also saved 20 million people on Vega Prime. You held the line at Arcturus when everyone else ran. You spent 30 years fighting so that people like me could live in peace." Thomas's voice cracked slightly. "I was so busy being angry about what you did not give me that I forgot about what you gave everyone else." Elias set down his tools. He stood slowly, his old bones protesting. "I should have been there," he said. "For you. For your mother. I made choices and they had consequences. I cannot undo that." "No, you cannot." Thomas took a breath. "But I am not here to rehash the past. I am here because I watched the news footage. I saw you fight 23 raiders to protect someone you care about. I saw you nearly die for her. Cythera. Yes, the draconian nurse. The one you have been bringing tea to for years." Thomas shook his head slowly. "Do you know what I felt when I saw that? Anger? Jealousy." The word hung in the air. "I was jealous," Thomas continued, "because you were willing to die for her. You showed her more love in a single moment than I ever felt from you in my entire childhood. And I hated you for it. But then I thought about it more. And I realized something." "What?" "You did not change. You were always like this. Ready to throw yourself in front of danger for others. Ready to sacrifice everything for people you cared about. Mom knew it. That is why she married you. That is why she stayed with you even when you were gone. Your mother was a remarkable woman. She was. And she used to tell me stories about you. About the things you did. The people you saved. I did not want to hear them. I just wanted a father who was there. But now I understand. You were there. Just not for us. You were there for everyone else." Elias felt tears prick his eyes. He had not cried in years. "I am sorry," he said. "I am sorry I was not the father you needed. I know. I read your messages. All of them." Thomas stepped closer. "I did not come here to forgive you. I do not know if I can do that. But I came here to try. To see if there is something left between us. Some foundation we can build on. There is always something left. As long as we are both alive. That is what Mom used to say. I know. I learned it from her." They stood facing each other. Two men who had spent decades apart. Two lives that had grown in different directions. But they were still connected. Still father and son. Thomas held out his hand. Elias took it. It was not forgiveness. It was not healing. But it was a start. Thomas stayed for a week. He met Cythera. He listened to her stories. He helped Elias in the garden. They did not talk much about the past. There was too much pain there. Too much damage to process all at once. But they talked about the present. About Thomas's work as an engineer. About his wife and children. About the grandchildren Elias had never met. "You should come visit," Thomas said on the last day. "They would like to meet you. I am not sure I would know how to be a grandfather. You did not know how to be a father either. But you tried. That is all anyone can ask." Elias thought about it. The idea of leaving Kairos 7 felt strange. This had become his home, his world. But there were other worlds. Other lives he was connected to. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe in a few months. I will hold you to that." Thomas hugged him. It was awkward and brief and imperfect. But it was real. Then he was gone. Elias stood outside his cottage and watched the shuttle disappear into the gray sky. Cythera came to stand beside him. "That was your son," she said. "Yes. You told me he would never forgive you. I was wrong. He has not forgiven me. But he is willing to try. Sometimes that is enough. Humans are strange creatures. We are. But sometimes our strangeness leads to good things. Cythera reached out and took his hand. I am glad he came, she said. I am glad you have more than just me. You will always be important. No matter who else comes into my life. I know. But I will not live forever. Draconians live long, but not eternal. And you, humans, are so fragile, so brief. Are you worried about losing me? Every day. Elias squeezed her claw gently. Then we make the most of the time we have. That is all anyone can do. The years continued to pass. Elias grew older. His hair turned white. His hands began to shake. The walks to the checkpoint became slower, more difficult. Some mornings, he had to stop halfway and rest, but he never stopped. Every morning, tea. Every morning, conversation. Every morning, Cythera. She noticed the changes. Of course she noticed. Her species measured time in centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall. She understood mortality better than any human ever could. She never spoke of it directly, but she became gentler, more careful. She started meeting him halfway on the path to save him the walk. She started coming to the cottage in the evenings instead of staying at her post. They spent more time together, not because they had more to say, but because silence together was better than silence alone. On Elias's 80th birthday, Cythera gave him a gift. It was a small crystal, dark blue, that seemed to hold light within it. This is a memory stone, she explained. My people use them to preserve important moments. When you hold it and think of something, the stone remembers. Later, anyone who holds it can experience that memory. What should I remember? Anything. Everything. The memories you want to keep. The moments that matter most. Elias held the stone and closed his eyes. He thought of Maria, of Thomas as a child, of his soldiers, the living and the dead, of the first morning he brought Cythera tea, of her laugh, of her warmth, of all the mornings and evenings they had shared. The stone grew warm in his hand. Thank you, he said. This is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. It is the only thing of value I have. I wanted you to have it. I will fill it with good memories. Memories of us. That is all I ask. Time moved forward, as it always does. Elias turned 85, then 90. His body was failing. He could feel it in every breath, every heartbeat, every morning that it became harder to get out of bed. But he still made tea. He still walked to meet Cythera. Some things were more important than comfort. On his last morning, Elias woke with a strange feeling. Not pain exactly, more like peace. Like something that had been waiting for a long time was finally ready. He made tea. His hands shook so badly that he spilled half of it, but he filled the thermos and put on his coat. The walk to the checkpoint took longer than usual. He had to stop 3 times, but Cythera was waiting for him, as she always was. You should not have walked today, she said. Her voice was worried. I wanted to see you. You could have called. I would have come to you. I know. But this is our ritual. I did not want to break it. He handed her the thermos. She took it but did not drink. She was looking at him with those golden eyes, seeing something he could not hide. Elias, she said softly. I know. How long? I do not know. Today, tomorrow, soon. Cythera made a sound deep in her throat. A keening sound. The sound Draconians made for the death of those they loved. Do not mourn me yet, Elias said. I am still here, and I want to spend whatever time I have left with you. What can I do? Just be with me. That is all I have ever needed. They sat together at the checkpoint. Cythera wrapped her body around him, sharing her warmth. They did not talk much. There was nothing left to say. Everything important had already been spoken over 20 years of mornings. As the sun began to set, Elias spoke one last time. In my cottage, on the table, there is a note in the thermos. The note explains everything. The thermos is for you. One last cup of tea. Elias, promise me you will read it. Promise me you will drink the tea. I promise. And promise me one more thing. Anything. Do not let them make you cold again. Whatever happens next, whatever your people say, do not go back to being frozen. You learned how to feel, how to love. Do not let anyone take that away. I promise. I promise. Elias smiled. He reached up and touched her face. Her scales were warm. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." He closed his eyes. Cythera held him through the night. She held him as the stars came out and the moons rose and the wind sang across the frozen plains. She held him as his breathing slowed and his heart grew quiet and the warmth faded from his body. When morning came, she keened. The sound echoed across the moon. It rose into the sky and carried into space. It was heard on ships passing through the system. It was recorded by the automated sensors at the checkpoint. For 3 days, Cythera keened. She did not eat. She did not move. She simply held the body of the man who had taught her how to love and cried for all she had lost. On the 4th day, she went to the cottage. The note was on the table, as he had said. Beside it was the thermos, still warm somehow, as if he had just made it. She read the note. "My dear Cythera, if you are reading this, then I have gone on ahead. Do not be sad for too long. We had 20 good years. That is more than most people get. I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. After Maria died, I thought I was done. I thought there was nothing left to live for. You showed me I was wrong. You taught me that kindness does not need a reason, that compassion does not care about species, that love is something you do, not something you feel. I am leaving you the memory stone. It is full now. Every good moment of the last 20 years is inside it. Whenever you miss me, hold the stone. I will be there, but do not spend all your time looking backward. You have centuries ahead of you, centuries to live, to grow, to feel. Find new people to care about. Make new memories. The universe is full of lonely creatures who need someone to bring them tea. Thank you for letting me be useful one more time. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for teaching me how to love again. Do not let them make you cold. I will be waiting, wherever I am, with a warm cup of tea. Always yours, Elias." Cythera drank the tea. It was perfect. The exact temperature he always made it. The exact blend she preferred. Even in death, he had remembered every detail. She held the memory stone to her chest and let the memories flow through her. 20 years of mornings, 20 years of conversations, 20 years of warmth and laughter and love. He was gone, but he was also still there. In the stone, in her heart, in the changes he had made to who she was. She would carry him with her for the rest of her long life, and she would never be cold again. 100 years had passed since Elias Vance died on a frozen moon at the edge of known space. The moon was no longer frozen, at least, not all of it. Where his cottage once stood alone on the empty plains, a city had grown. They called it Vance's Landing. It was the first joint human-draconian colony in history. 20,000 people lived there now. Half were human, half were draconian. They lived in buildings designed to accommodate both species, worked in jobs that required cooperation between them, raised families that would have been impossible a century ago. The checkpoint was still there, but it was no longer a forgotten outpost monitoring an empty border. It was the center of the city, surrounded by a beautiful plaza filled with gardens and fountains and benches where people of both species could rest. And in the center of the plaza stood 2 statues. The first was a human man, old, weathered. His face was kind, with deep lines around his eyes and a slight smile on his lips. He wore a simple coat and held a thermos in his outstretched hand. The statue was made of bronze, darkened by age, but polished smooth by a century of hands touching it. The second was a draconian, tall, powerful. Her scales were carved from blue stone that caught the light like sapphires. Her head was bowed slightly, accepting the offering from the human beside her. Her expression was peaceful, grateful. Between them, on a pedestal of black marble, was a plaque written in both languages. Here stood Elias Vance and Cythera of the 4th clutch. He offered warmth to one who had been left to freeze. She guarded his fragile flame until its end. In a galaxy of cold equations and ancient grudges, they proved that kindness requires no logic, and compassion knows no species. They reminded us what we could be. Every day, thousands of people passed through the plaza. They sat on the benches and ate their lunches. They walked their children through the gardens. They stopped at the statues and read the plaque and took pictures to send to friends and family on distant worlds. The story of Elias and Cythera had spread far beyond Kiros 7. It was taught in schools on human worlds and draconian worlds alike. It was the subject of books and films and songs. It had become legend, but legends often lose their truth. They become polished and simplified, turned into easy lessons and comfortable morals. The real story, the complicated story, sometimes gets forgotten. That was why the statue of Cythera was never quite as warm as it should be. The engineers who designed the plaza had installed heating elements beneath the statues. They wanted to keep them comfortable during the harsh winters that still swept across Kiros 7. The heating elements worked perfectly for the human statue, but the draconian statue was different. No matter how high they turned the heat, the blue stone always seemed slightly cooler than the surrounding air. Not cold, exactly, just cooler. Enough to notice if you touched it. The engineers ran tests. They checked the heating elements. They examined the stone. Everything was functioning correctly. There was no explanation for the temperature difference. Eventually, they gave up trying to fix it. They called it a quirk of the materials, an interesting anomaly. Nothing more. But the children knew better. Every morning, without fail, someone left a cup of tea at the base of Elias's statue. Sometimes it was a human. Sometimes it was a draconian. Sometimes it was a child who had heard the story and wanted to be part of it. The tea was always fresh, always warm, always placed carefully in the bronze hands that had been worn smooth by a century of similar offerings. And every morning, the statue of Cythera seemed just a little warmer, just a little brighter, just a little more alive. The old woman who ran the tea shop across the plaza swore that she had seen the statues move once. Late at night, when the city was sleeping, she had looked out her window and seen the bronze man turn to look at the blue stone woman. She had seen him smile. Nobody believed her. She was old. Her eyes were failing. It was probably just a trick of the light, but she knew what she saw, and she kept selling tea to anyone who wanted to leave an offering. Far from the plaza, in the diplomatic quarter of the city, a meeting was taking place. Ambassador Chen Wei represented the Human Alliance. He was a small man, careful and precise, with eyes that missed nothing. He had spent his entire career building bridges between species, and he considered the existence of Vance's Landing to be his greatest achievement. Across the table from him sat Counselor Threxnak of the Draconian Empire. She was young by Draconian standards, only 400 years old, but she had risen quickly through the ranks. Her scales were deep green, almost black, and her eyes were cold gold. They were discussing trade agreements, shipping routes, resource allocations, the kind of boring, necessary work that kept civilizations running smoothly. But Chen Wei could tell that something was bothering the counselor. She kept glancing out the window, toward the plaza, toward the statues. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Threxnak was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "I have been thinking about them, Elias, Vance, and Cythera, about what they did, about what they meant. They are the foundation of this colony, the symbol of everything we have built together. Yes, but do you understand why that symbol works? Why it matters?" Chen Wei frowned. He thought he understood, but he had learned that Draconians often saw things differently than humans. "Tell me," he said. Threxnak stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the statues, at the people moving through the plaza, at the city that had grown around them. "My people have studied humans for centuries. When we first encountered you, we thought you were primitive, weak, emotional. We expected you to destroy yourselves within a few generations. And yet we are still here. Yes, you are still here. More than still here. You have spread across the galaxy faster than any species we have ever encountered. You have adapted to environments we thought impossible. You have built things we never imagined. We are resilient. You are more than resilient. You are impossible." She turned to look at him. "My people have ruled our corner of the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. We have perfect logic, perfect efficiency, perfect control. And in all that time, we have never changed. We are the same now as we were at the beginning. Is that a bad thing? We did not think so. We thought stability was strength. We thought emotion was weakness. We thought compassion was contamination." She paused. "Cythera taught us differently." Chen Wei waited. He knew better than to interrupt a Draconian who was working through a difficult thought. "When Cythera saved those human prisoners, my people called her corrupted. They said she had been infected by human weakness. They sent her to die on a frozen moon." Threxnak shook her head slowly. But she did not die. She met Elias Vance, and together, they changed everything. The story inspired both our peoples. It did more than inspire. It proved something that my people did not want to accept. Threxnak looked out the window again. It proved that emotion is not weakness. It proved that compassion is not contamination. It proved that the coldest, most logical species in the galaxy could learn to feel, could learn to love. And that scared your leaders, terrified them. Because if one Draconian could change, others could change too. And if others changed, then everything our society was built on would crumble. But it did not crumble. No. It evolved. Slowly, painfully. There were those who fought against it, who called the changes a disease. But the story of Elias and Cythera was too powerful, too beautiful. It spread faster than any attempt to contain it. She turned back to face Chenwei. Do you know what the youngest generation of Draconians calls themselves? The ones born in the last 50 years? No. Cythera's children. They have taken her name as their identity. They believe that compassion and logic can coexist. They believe that feeling makes us stronger, not weaker. They are changing our society from the inside out. And the old guard? The old guard is dying. That is what happens to those who cannot change. They become irrelevant. They fade away. Chenwei smiled. So the frozen nurse and the retired veteran actually changed Draconian civilization. They changed both our civilizations. This colony exists because of them. The peace treaty exists because of them. Every child of both species who grows up believing that kindness matters, that compassion counts, that love is not weakness, they exist because of them. She looked at the statues one more time. 1 cup of tea, she said softly. That is all it took. One small act of kindness repeated every morning for years, and it changed the galaxy. In the plaza, a young girl was approaching the statues. She was perhaps 7 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes. Her mother stood nearby, watching. The girl was carrying a small cup in her hands. Steam rose from it. She walked up to the bronze man and looked at him for a long moment. Then she carefully placed the cup in his outstretched hands. Thank you for being nice to her, she said in a small voice. My teacher told us what you did. I think it was very brave. She turned to the blue stone woman and reached up to touch the cold scales. And thank you for saving him. You were brave too. The mother smiled and called for her daughter. They walked away together, the girl looking back one more time at the statues. The sun was setting over Vance's landing. The sky turned from gray to orange to deep purple. The lights of the city began to flicker on, human and draconian homes side by side. In the plaza, the statues cast long shadows across the stone. The bronze man held his offering of tea. The blue stone woman bowed her head to accept it. Between them, captured forever in metal and stone, was the moment that had changed everything. Just a human and a draconian. Just a soldier and a nurse. Just two lonely creatures who had found each other in the cold. But sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is everything. When the historians wrote about this era, they would talk about treaties and trade agreements, about political shifts and economic changes. They would analyze the factors that led to peace between the two species. They would argue about causes and effects, about great forces of history moving civilizations forward. But they would all agree on one thing. It started with a cup of tea. A human man, old and tired and alone, walked across a frozen plain to offer warmth to a stranger. He did not do it for political reasons. He did not do it to change history. He did it because it was cold, and she was freezing, and he could not just watch her suffer. That was the human thing. The strange, illogical, impossible thing that Draconians still struggled to understand. Humans did not calculate the worth of their kindness. They did not weigh the costs and benefits. They just helped because they could, because it was right, because no one should be alone in the cold. Cythera understood now. She had learned it from Elias, all those years ago, and she had taught it to others, and they had taught it to more, until the whole galaxy was touched by the ripples of that first morning, that first cup of tea. She was gone now, of course. Draconians lived for centuries, but not forever. She had died peacefully, 40 years after Elias, surrounded by friends and students who had learned from her example. Her last words were the same as his. Thank you for letting me be useful. But she was not really gone. Not completely. The memory stone Elias had given her was now in the museum at the center of the city. Anyone could hold it and experience their memories. 20 years of mornings, 20 years of tea and conversation and love. Some people wept when they held it. Others laughed. Some said it changed their lives, that it showed them what was possible when two people stopped seeing species and started seeing souls. The stone was warm to the touch. No one could explain why. Night fell over Vance's Landing. The plaza emptied as people went home to their families. The cup of tea sat cooling in the bronze man's hands, but the statue of Cythera was not cold anymore. Somehow, impossibly, the blue stone had warmed throughout the day. Not much, just enough to notice, just enough to remember. Some said it was the heating elements finally working. Others, the children especially, knew better. They said that somewhere, beyond the stars, an old man was making tea for a frozen nurse. They said that kindness could not be stopped by death, that love could not be contained by stone, that some things were stronger than the cold equations of the universe. They said that if you stood very still in the plaza at night, when the wind died down and the city grew quiet, you could hear them, two voices in the darkness, human and draconian, talking about everything and nothing, laughing together, being together, still warm, still bright, still remembered. And in the morning, someone would always come. Someone would always bring tea. Someone would always remember the soldier and the nurse who had proven that kindness was stronger than cold. The story would continue. Not the same story, but new ones. New soldiers and nurses, new humans and draconians, finding each other across the vast distances of space. Learning to care, learning to love. Learning what Elias and Cythera had learned on a frozen moon at the edge of everything. That no one should be alone in the cold. That warmth can be shared. That small acts, repeated with love, can change the universe. The statues stood together in the plaza, bronze hand offering to blue stone claw. The light of distant stars fell on them both, and somewhere, somehow, they were smiling. The story was done, but the truth it carried would live forever. Humanity had many gifts: intelligence, adaptability, resilience, but their greatest gift, the one that made them truly special, was simpler than all of that. They saw someone cold. They made tea. And the Draconians, ancient and wise and eternal, were still learning to understand. But they were getting warmer. One cup at a time. One kindness at a time. One morning at a time. Forever.